Hello, everyone, and welcome to the weekly MMA Cycles Market Update. This is Gianni DePoce, and it is great, as always, to be with you all. This week, we are joined by our special guest, Raymond Merriman. Ray, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Johnny. Good to be with you.
Oh, great. It's great to have you as well. So we had another wild week in markets. A lot of volatility. Stocks dropped to new multi-month lows. We saw some big moves in various commodity markets. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies really took it on the chin as well. And we saw some notable moves in currency markets as well. And precious metals dropped to new multi-month lows as well. So let me go ahead and share my screen here and pull up a chart of the Dow. We see that we hit a pretty significant low on Thursday, and we started what could be a nice rally, and we closed near the highs of the day on Friday. But Ray, you might want to speak to this. Since we're in Mercury retrograde, is this something that we should be a little bit skeptical of right now?
Well, yes. Whenever Mercury is retrograde, we have a tendency for fake outs, false buy and sell signals. However, one thing to note is that when Mercury goes retrograde, if you get a cycle low or high within 3 or 4 trading days at the most, that's a good sign. If you get a low like you had yesterday, which is one day after Mercury went retrograde, and you then take it out after having a nice rally today, that could be that could indicate the trend continues to at least the middle of the Mercury retrograde cycle.
Indeed, and as you alluded to, Mercury went retrograde on the 10th, and then we broke lower and then rallied. So was the false move the initial break lower? These are the types of questions we ask, when a planet like Mercury changes direction. We also had Jupiter ingress into the fire sign of Aries. So that's going to have some major repercussions as well. But, we can go ahead and look at the NASDAQ here too. The NASDAQ ended up being up on the day on Thursday and closed nicely on Friday as well. But Ray, is there anything that you want to mention as it pertains to Jupiter going into Aries? I know where I'm at. It got really hot in terms of the weather.
Yes, it is a weather aspect, and it's fire, which means hot, which means we may be seeing a drought happen now in the summer. But as far as markets and psychology goes, whenever Jupiter changes signs, usually pretty close to that, there's a whole change in investor psychology. And what has the investor psychology been in the last few weeks? Well, it's been pretty negative, pretty bearish. So Jupiter going to Aries was a prelude to the idea that investors might start seeing a different narrative, might be selling a different narrative that's a little bit more bullish. And of course, Mercury retrograde at the same time. This is all May 10th and 11th, just the last day or two. But Mercury retrograde, Jupiter going to Aries, it's all indicative of a switch in market psychology that is developing within a couple of days. And it may have started yesterday. And one more point to that matter, Johnny, all this sell-off, I think, is related to the Sun conjunct Uranus last week. Okay, that's right between the eclipse cycles, between April 30th and Monday, May 16th. You got the Sun-Uranus conjunction in the middle of an eclipse cycle. And as you know with Uranus, if there's anything, if the market's close to support, it tends to break it, or resistance, it tends to break it. Now, these breaks tend to only last up to maybe 8 days, but they can be devastating, as we've seen since that high we had on May 4th. It's been a pretty serious decline until yesterday for, what was that, 7 trading days. That was pretty vicious. And then we got some respite today.
Indeed. And since we're on the topic of Jupiter, I think the next market we should look at is crude oil, because it's one of the planets that rules crude oil. And we had some pretty important price action this past week. Crude oil was declining slightly as Jupiter switched signs, but it caught a really nice bid by the end of the week and closed near the highs. So the trend remains very much still up. And, Jupiter in Pisces was pretty bullish for crude oil, but that seemed to be more of a, well, it was bullish for the market. But now as Jupiter goes into Aries, it seems like the catalyst for higher crude oil prices could be additional geopolitical tension.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you notice that the low of the last couple of weeks was exactly on the day that Jupiter went into Aries. So you make a good point there.
Yeah, Jupiter, well, I should say crude oil has been a really good market for geocosmics as of late. You know, we had the cycle low that happened on April 11th when Jupiter had the conjunction with Pisces, with Neptune in Pisces. And then now this week, as Jupiter ingressed into Aries, we saw some pretty bullish price action. So this has been a really solid market to trade when it comes to geocosmics.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Do you want to look at precious metals or Bitcoin next?
Precious metals are fine. Sure. Let's look at that, because that fits right into the webinar presentation that you and I and Ulrich were part of last week. And, you know, my whole modus operandi with gold is that there's a lot of pressure now that we made that double top back in March at 2078 to the all-time high we had in 2020 at 2089. So this is a bearish pattern, as you can see here, and it even broke lower. It broke lower as we went through the middle of last week, the Mercury retrograde into Jupiter in Aries. So the only thing is, these are kind of like equal swings down as you're kind of showing here. You know, that you had that drop from 2079, 2078 area to 1880. That's about $200. And then we went up to 2000. You see that move up 2000? Yep. And now today we went down to 1800. So $200 drops in each case. Yeah. So we could see some support here, but we're going to be watching it very carefully because of our cycles outlook that we explained in detail on the webinar. You know, this is very, very important. If we start breaking much below Friday, we might only be a third of the way down to where we're going.
Yeah. Well, let's pull up a chart of silver next, and you know, this one's been declining more than gold, and it actually made new multi-month lows. So silver has been acting much more bearish than gold. Do you have any other comments on that, Ray?
Well, again, as we mentioned in the webinar, the fact that it broke that double bottom at 2141 back in September and December, you had the double bottom there and you broke that. That's Uranus again. So Uranus breaks support. So it didn't break the major supporting gold. Gold has held its low of the last year or so, but silver has broken it, and this is typical of Uranus being involved in the play that's going on. And so we'll see if it's gonna be better next week or not, but it doesn't look good, does it?
No, but this is an excellent segue into the next market that we want to look at, which is Bitcoin, because you know, we know that Uranus is going through Taurus, and we had, you know, the Sun Uranus conjunction that was very bearish for Bitcoin. It was right on this day. We had that really sharp down day, and it really started the big decline in Bitcoin. But what's on my horizon, or on my radar, I should say, next week, Ray, is the Lunar Eclipse on May 16th, because that's going to be in Taurus well, the moon's going to be in Scorpio, but it's going to be the Taurus Scorpio axis, you know, in the zodiac. And we know that Uranus is in the sign of Taurus right now. So there's been a lot of big crypto news this week. We had the Terra coin, the ticker symbol Luna US dollar, was over $100 a couple weeks ago, and now it's trading for pennies. So we're starting to see the bust portion of the boom bust cycle associated with Uranus's transit through Taurus, the sign that rules currencies. But before I get to that, I want to drop a couple other aspects coming up next week so that you can comment on those as well, Ray. We have a conjunction with Mars and Neptune on May 18th. We have the Sun trine Pluto on May 19th, and then we begin Gemini season. The Sun will ingress into Gemini on May 20th. So any thoughts or comments on Bitcoin or any of the aspects coming up next week?
There's a couple of things I want to say about Bitcoin. One, the $25,000 mark is something that we identified in the webinar last weekend. And as you know, just last Thursday, a week ago Thursday, Bitcoin is trading close to 40,000. So that's a huge decline, going from 40,000 to 25,000, which was one of the areas of support we talked about in the webinar. If you want to know what we think after that, you should consider getting a recording of that. The other thing I want to point out is, you see how Bitcoin has dropped so much in the last year. But if you look at Ethereum, it went down to 1702, and the low of last June, or whatever it was, I think it was last June, I don't know if you can show that, it was 1700.
Yeah.
So Ethereum held that low of last summer. Bitcoin broke it. So we got a temporary case here, some intermarket bullish divergence. So the eclipse factor may be over as we're going to start next week past the eclipse. I mean, once we get to Monday's trading in the US, it's past the eclipse. We're starting to go into a Sagittarius Capricorn moon. So you could see a change for a couple of days here, at least, if not even a couple of weeks. You know, a bounce, a short covering rally possibly could happen here. We'll discuss this more in our weekly reports. But this is an interesting thing. You see the intermarket bullish divergence here at the 1700 with Ethereum holding and Bitcoin breaking below its low of 28,800.
Indeed, that is very, very significant. So,
yeah.
Ray, we covered a nice variety of markets here. Anything else that you want to talk about? We know the euro dropped and tested its low from a couple of years back, but we don't have that updated chart available for us right now. But
I would like to bring to people's attention an outer planet aspect that's going on that kind of escaped my radar until just a couple of days ago. And as Jupiter went into Aries, 0 degrees, it made a semi-square to Uranus at 15 degrees of Taurus.
Yeah.
That's big. I mean, Jupiter is big. It's the god of exaggeration, if you will. Yeah. And Uranus is disturbance. So we had a big disturbance, a big breakout, especially in Bitcoin, which fits with Uranus in Taurus, which is a cryptocurrency type of an aspect. And the thing is look in the future, we're going to see this come up again. When Saturn and Uranus come into a square in late September, early October of next year, Jupiter is going to make a semi-square to both of them. It's going to be on the midpoint. Wow. So we have something very, very large looming in the cosmos coming up September and October.
Yeah, and that's something we discussed in the webinar last weekend, which again, strongly encourage our viewers to check it out if you haven't. It's at MMAcycles.com, but we talked about the geocosmics of the fall and how the Saturn Uranus square, you know, we're not quite through with that yet. And that really began the whole COVID crash and the supply chain shortages. So, you know, we're going to see, I think the grand finale is coming this fall. And as you point out with that Jupiter semi-square, it could be even more dramatic than we initially thought.
Especially since it's in the midpoint, right at the midpoint of the Saturn Uranus square. It's going to be powerful.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Ray, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for taking some time to come on and speak with me. It's always a pleasure having you on, and I know the viewers love to hear your thoughts on the market as well. So I would encourage everyone to check us out at www.mmacycles.com. You can also sign up for our free weekly forecast that gets emailed to your inbox each and every week, and check out our other reports. We have reports on various market stocks, T-notes, precious metals, cryptocurrencies, commodities, the whole gamut, if you will. So don't miss out, www.mmacycles.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. Ray, any last words?
No, thank you, Johnny. You're doing a great job. Thanks for having me as your guest. I always look forward to your weekly comments here on this YouTube. Thank you.
Indeed. Thanks so much, Ray. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye-bye now.